This video is going to be my first preview of the Ravens-Steelers rematch in Week 16 that's going to take place in Baltimore on Saturday afternoon. I'm going to focus this first one on the Ravens defense matching up with the Pittsburgh Steelers offense. I think these two units in some ways are kind of going in opposite directions. The Ravens defense has clearly been improved since our loss to the Browns essentially in Week 8, but even a little bit more after the Bengals game in Week 10. A different brand, different style of defense, more downhill stuff against limiting quarterbacks to short passing games, still getting after the quarterback. If you don't know, we've got 20 sacks in our last 6 games, and at this point are third in the NFL with 44 sacks, behind only the Broncos and I believe the Texans. I'm going to focus on the style of play that the Steelers utilize. This is going to be a significant lead into the film portion of this video. I'll be honest with you. You're probably looking at the 6-7 minute mark before I get the film started. I'll edit this after production so that you can skip directly to the film study portion of it if you wish. First of all, the Steelers are top 4 in the league, just like the Ravens, in terms of run-to-pass percentage. They're at 53% run, essentially 47% pass. That averages out to, if I did my numbers right, about 33 runs per game versus 28 passes. Certainly, Justin Fields playing a lot early in the season impacted those numbers, but what it's done is it's allowed Russell Wilson to only be sacked 21 times. Now, we did get to him 4 times in the first game. The Browns also had 4 sacks the following week in their 24-19 win. The Eagles only had 2 last week, but the reality is they held Russell Wilson to 14 of 22 passing for 128 yards and 1 touchdown. Similarly, in our loss in Pittsburgh in Week 11, Wilson was only 23 of 36 for 205 yards and 1 interception. His yards per completion, yards per attempt, since that game has pretty much been significantly low. The only outlier there is their game against the Cincinnati Bengals, and I'm going to be forced to kind of break up the stats or the trends, patterns, if you will, since that game in order to make some of my points. It's up to you whether or not you want to accept that game being pulled or parsed out of the data. 56% of the Steelers' plays in 2024 involve their running backs or Justin Fields on a run concept. So let me make sure that I put out where I got that data from. 890 total offensive plays for the Steelers this year. 412 of them are runs by the running backs or Fields, who's not their starting quarterback at this point in time. Additional to that, or stacked on top of it, you've got 86 targets to the running backs in the pass game. And by the way, their running backs are extremely underrated in the pass game. I got them at 69 of 86 catch percentage this year, so 80% catch percentage, even though they don't have any touchdowns involved in those 86 targets. They do have 21 first downs, so about a first down every 4 targets, number one. Number two, 80% catch rate, I think is pretty significant. 360 carries have been split between Harris, Warren, and Patterson on 890 offensive plays. I think the system there, whether it's Tomlin-related or the offensive coordinator that they brought in, Arthur Smith, and his awareness, recognition of some of the best practices for their team, let's put it that way, it's heavily reliant on the run game and getting the running backs involved. I would say it's a very safe, conservative offense. We pretty much knew that already. And here's where I'm going to talk about the trends of what their offense has been doing and what our defense has been doing in the last 5 weeks. So since our loss in Pittsburgh, 18-16 in Week 11, where we held them to 18 first downs and only 122 rushing yards. Here's what the Steelers have done. 105 yards rushing per game. Now, that may sound like it's a winnable formula for them. I, in fact, think they've got to be somewhere in the 125, 130 range to have the best opportunity to win football games against good defenses in the NFL, at least. So let's compare that 105 yards rushing in the last 5 games to what they were in their 7-2 start. Essentially, leading up to their game against us in Week 11, they were 7-2, just coming off the win over the Commanders where they generated 140 yards rushing, which was pretty typical to that point. In their 7-2 start, the Steelers averaged 138 rushing yards per game and over 22 first downs per game. Since that time, 105 on the ground in the last 5 games, including the game against the Bengals. And here's their first downs by game: 18, 17, 28, that's the Cincinnati Bengals defense, and then 15 and 10. If you were to separate the data, the 4 games, including our loss in Pittsburgh in Week 11, their average first downs per game in those 4 contests, 15. I think there's pretty significant data here that teams are figuring out a way to limit them. I'm not saying we have to stop the running game. They know what they're doing. Number one, they've got a good run blocking offensive line. It's a great scheme that Arthur Smith has. He finds ways to get the running backs involved, whether it's outside zone stuff, duo, which is one of the most dangerous yet somehow underrated run schemes in the NFL, if you ask me. And then also the play action screens that they used against us, I think 4 times from mid-second quarter on. Once their offensive staff, in my opinion, recognized they weren't getting things done in the pass game with their first read, number one, and number two, they weren't really dominating us with the run game as well. My main point to start here is I think that the Ravens have got to slow down significantly and or stop the Steelers' run game, force Russell Wilson to throw the ball a lot. And you may say, well, Coach, we have to get pressure. In known passing situations, we are. I don't share the same concerns, and I haven't for 2 months, that many other Ravens fans have about QB pressure rate. Like I said earlier, we have 20 sacks over our last 6 games, 3rd in the NFL in sacks right now at 44, behind only the Broncos and the Texans. Van Noy has 9, Owe has 8, Matabike has 5, and here's the key. 12 other players have at least 1 sack for the Ravens this year. It's been a little surprising for me, to be honest with you, with Mike Macdonald leaving. Increased production in sacks seems to follow Mike Macdonald. Michigan, and then 2 years with the Ravens in 2022 and 2023. It has not happened this year. We've actually continued on our same pace. We may not get to 60 like we did last year, probably going to come in around 52, 53, somewhere in that range. But Seattle has not triggered, his presence in Seattle has not triggered an uptick in sacks like he's seen in other places. So I think the basic premise here is, statistically, the Steelers' offense appears to be less efficient running the football recently, and we have been more sound defensively, not giving up as many big plays. In essence, I think we've got to stop the run and stop it early and force the Steelers to go to known passing situations whereby our pass rush can actually continue to get to the quarterback. Let's get some of the film started here. I will review, I think, 11 plays from the Ravens' first game against the Steelers, the 18-16 loss. We had fast reactions to Russell Wilson's first read. We generally took that away, in my opinion, number one. Number two, I do have one complaint. We didn't do a good job of identifying anything related to their, quote, 11 personnel grouping that has Skowronek in it, number 15. He lines up as a wide receiver, positionally listed as a wide receiver, oftentimes lines up at tight end, and in some cases lines up as a fullback. Short completions to George Pickens, I think, is got to be part of the game plan, meaning if we give up short passes to him, that's a good thing, as opposed to anything that's deeper down the field. Here's some stats to throw at you that kind of go on with part of the preview that I talked about, the running back's efficiency and usage in the pass game. Pickens in the first game had 8 catches for 89 yards on 12 targets. Running backs, meanwhile, Harris and Warren had 8 catches on 9 targets for 67 yards. So between those 3 players, Pickens and the 2 running backs, 21 of Wilson's 36 passes went to those guys. There's a large majority of their plays, their concepts, if you ask me, that are designed to get the running backs the ball, number one, and or involve George Pickens. This is on their first drive. We hold them to a field goal here. It's a 12 personnel bunch concept. We cover up routes really well in this game, especially compared with what we had done earlier in the season. Hopefully the video isn't staggering too much for you guys when I slow it up, but Wilson is booting out to the side. You got the threat of Van Noy getting pressure, but watch all these routes that emanate from the other side of the field and how well we cover them up. Essentially swallowed all the concepts or options for Russell Wilson to do anything productive, that is, and he's forced to throw the ball out of bounds on a 2nd and 8. Moving forward here to the second possession, and this is an example of what I'm talking about. Skowronek is the third wide receiver, if you will, but they utilize him as a fullback. And it's not that he's not a good football player, in my opinion, but I think we want him on the field. And what I mean by that is they're less versatile with him on the field and less dangerous, in my opinion. If they're going to put him at fullback, if they're going to put him at tight end or wide receiver, I feel like they are limiting what they're able to do. I would feel more threatened if they were actually in 12 personnel. But what their response is going to be, or the reason why they're doing this, is to be able to run the football from what looks like a 21 personnel grouping with Skowronek at fullback against our nickel defense. The problem is when we do have Trenton Simpson on the field and or Malik Harrison, those guys are versatile. They can line up at inside linebacker and or edge defender. In this case, we've created basically a 5-3 look with Marlon Humphrey, Ardarius Washington walked into the box, and then Harrison and Simpson as the edge defenders. Ends up being a 4-yard gain by Najee Harris on a first down. I think having Ardarius Washington on the field has changed a lot. It's made us more versatile. He's just incredibly smart. Watch what happens here and then how that relates to Ardarius Washington's fit. It's Brent Urban, who's just a damn good football player. And so they're trying to scoop him with Jones. They're trying to get Jones, is trying to get to this side of him, number one, and or just take him down. Run him that way such that Harris can possibly wind this back. And Ardarius is just smart about where to fit. He basically knows it's cancel gaps is what we used to call it. So if Brent Urban is in this gap, then you have this gap. But if, say, Brent Urban was to get scooped and end up over here, basically fall back on a lag technique, then Ardarius Washington will be responsible for folding over the top. Essentially, Skowronek's presence on the field allows them to run 21 or 12 personnel concepts from an 11 personnel grouping against our nickel. And that was one of the elements of the game that I didn't think we did a great job of. You notice this is the second possession. It's a 3rd and 2. Skowronek is not on the field. This is an actual 11 personnel grouping. One of the times where they target Brandon Stevens down the left side of the field. I mean, we just have to accept at this point that this is what we're going to see in some third down situations where quarterbacks like Russell Wilson, A, know that it's man, at least on the outside, and B, feel comfortable throwing it over there because what's the risk? What's the drawback or penalty that they get for just throwing it up? It doesn't happen to be to George Pickens there. I really do like when they put Pickens in the slot and we match up with Marlon Humphrey on him. They do. I feel like Arthur Smith does a significant amount of things to try to get Russell Wilson as many favorable matchups as possible. That's good coaching, all right? That is good coaching. But we can also be honest and recognize that what that means is they trust him less to make significant decisions pre-snap and post-snap. If they trusted him more, I don't think they would go to such lengths to create favorable or advantageous situations as much as they possibly do. I understand that people will disagree with that, and that's no problem. 3rd drive, this is a 1st and 10. Watch Ardarius's read. I would call this sky read. We started kind of running this 2022 with McDonald. Essentially, I think we're reading the back here, and if the back releases to the opposite side, I think Ardarius is going to have a different reaction. I think he's going to look for work from the trip side. But since the back releases down here, Ardarius is gone. Now, he doesn't finish the tackle because Jaylen Warren is difficult to deal with. He's difficult to get to the ground. Roquan is the guy who finishes it. He played a whale of a football game, in my opinion. Part of the formula for us to play well, to stop the Steelers' offense, is for Roquan to have a big impact. And we also did a lot of this switch cover 3, whereby one inside linebacker would blitz and the other inside linebacker would take over that drop. So they catch Simpson here with the cadence, and they understand they are aware that he's going to blitz, and so they try to pick it up. But when I say switch cover 3, what I mean is we're bringing an inside linebacker. Here I think is Adisa Isaac. He's dropping out. You won't necessarily be able to see him, I think, once the play progresses. And then Roquan is taking over the pass drop of Trenton Simpson. It's almost Steelers-esque. I mean, they've done that for decades. Certainly since I've been trying to cover and analyze the NFL, they've been one of the teams that I would say does this the most often. You may recall Robert Spillane's pick 6 in Baltimore, I think in the 2021 game, maybe 2020, I'm not sure. In Baltimore at a 1 p.m. game, he takes it to the house against Lamar. It came on a switch cover 3. So 4th and 1 on that same 3rd possession. Our defense was rolling earlier on, in my opinion. They are trying to run power on an unbalanced offensive line set with a jumbo tight end on the line. And I just don't feel like their offensive line is as athletic as advertised in some of these situations. Those words may come back to haunt me, and they may have a dominant offensive line performance in Baltimore on Saturday. But when I see them match up against us, particularly in the last 5 games as well, I have film against the Eagles, some film against the Bengals, who just don't have the same quality of defense as the other teams the Steelers have faced, the Browns, Eagles, Ravens. Certainly, the Eagles statistically are one of the better teams in the league, and we shouldn't be mentioned in the same breath as them over the course of the entire season. But since that loss to the Browns, we've played a different quality of defense as long as we weren't dealing with Joe Burrow. Fourth possession here, and it's a brilliant example of Tavius Robinson getting his pads below the tight end. This is all really made possible by him blowing up the tight end, the pulling tight end, which in this case is Freiermuth. They are dedicated to running the football. In my opinion, I've got 3 games film where early in the game, Arthur Smith, in my opinion, is searching for ways to run the football and can't get it done no matter what the personnel grouping, whether it's 12, jumbo 23, like the 4th down that I just showed you, 11 personnel with Skowronek on the field, 11 personnel typical without Skowronek on the field. We've got to, I think, in the first 4 or 5 possessions, hold down, limit, stop, whatever you want to call it, their run game such that they are forced to play a different style. I don't think they're going to play a different style of football from the standpoint of they want to run the football. I think we've got to dissuade them from doing so. It sounds quite simplistic, I understand, but I feel like Ravens Steelers, even in 2024, with all the rule set created to help the offense, is still going to be predicated upon or determined by the 3 things that pretty much football has always been used from a formula standpoint to determine who the winner is. Run the football, stop the run. Don't turn the football over, and get as many touchdowns as possible as opposed to limiting people, holding people, being held to field goals in the red zone. If we're able to stop/slow down their run game, not turn the football over, and also limit them to field goals when they do get in the scoring zone, I think we're going to be in great shape. And having said that, I understand the Steelers have won most of the games played against us in the last 4 or 5 years. Moving forward to the 4th possession, Humphrey is going to be all over Calvin Austin in man here up at the top side. Whether George Pickens plays or not, Humphrey in the slot is going to be a big determining factor because we can dissuade them from throwing the football to certain guys, in my opinion, and essentially leave Marlon alone. He's played that well for most of the season, in my opinion. Additional to that, we had some clean wins in this game from a pass rush standpoint. If we can get to known passing situations, known passing downs, I think that some of our guys can win, whether it's on the interior, whether it's against their tackles, like their left tackle here. I got them for multiple penalties last week against the Eagles D-line. Of course, they're in a different echelon than ours, in my opinion, because the Eagles can get pressure, organic pressure with a 4-man rush, not having to change or switch or stunt at all. They can just get pressure by beating your ass. The Ravens kind of have to rely a little bit more on some movement, some stunts, some anomalous blitzes where we drop an outside linebacker out, bring an inside backer. As an aside, I do think that bringing or rushing Roquan Smith more often has been a big factor in changing or altering the landscape post-snap for a quarterback. This is one of the examples that I'm talking about. It's not actually Skowronek that's on the field. It's 12 personnel. So they're doing the same thing. When I say that Smith appears to at times be searching for a way to make certain concepts work, this is one of them. I would call this wind back toss. And Ardarius Washington really makes the whole damn thing work for the Ravens. He's matched the tight end. They split zone it with Darnell Washington, the big tight end, and toss it to the downside. It's designed to go back to their right, the top portion of our screen, or left side of our defense. It's an exquisite run fit by Ardarius Washington. You will get the end zone angle, but right in here, you can see his helmet on the inside of this tight end. So as opposed to setting it inside, he basically wrong arms it. And Najee Harris does what most running backs would do here. He takes it to the outside because the interior gap is swallowed up. Ardarius has been playing badass football. It's been a huge change. Would I like to see Marcus Williams play and play well for us and have an impact? Of course. We're paying him a lot of money to be on this roster, to be in Baltimore. But at this point in time, Ardarius is doing things on a week-by-week basis that Marcus Williams, Eddie Jackson, obviously, and others just were not when they were given opportunities. He's been a very complete version of a safety that we can walk and move around pre- and post-snap. They cut Tavius Robinson here. It's a physical brand of football that they play. They're cutting him going low, and the tight end is going to wind this back and end up collisioning Ardarius. And it's because Ardarius gets to the inside gap that there's really, I mean, Trenton Simpson is there as well, don't get me wrong. There's nowhere for Najee Harris to go. Darius fits it up well. Oh, by the way, Tavius Robinson gets up off the deck. He sprawls and then gets involved in the tackle as well. We've got some tough, hard-nosed guys playing more snaps recently, and Darius Washington and Tavius Robinson are two of them, in my opinion. Still first half, that fifth possession, actually it's the very next play, and I think this is one of the answers that the Steelers went to in that game. It's 12 personnel ace, so you've got two tight ends on the field, and they weren't able to get anything going organically with the run game, which doesn't set up their pass game much at all. Even though the first play was a failed run concept, they go play action, and it's a running back screen, and the only guy here is Harrison. I'll kind of break down why. It's because we've lost secondary run support. We play so much man to the single receiver side. Now, this isn't actually the single receiver side, but we have calls in on defense whereby our corner to the boundary, even though the ball's in the middle of the field here, it's got these weird hashes where they played a college game. I think the day before, those are not actually the hashes for the NFL game. These are, but the ball's in the middle of the field, and because Pickens, number one, runs across the field, Brandon Stevens runs with him, and so Malik Harrison is absolutely outnumbered here at the point of attack. There is just no one else. I mean, it's no man's land. There's two blockers. It's 3-on-1. It's damn near 4-on-1. Really poor job, if you ask me, for us on this particular play. And I have to say this, I didn't think we adjusted to that concept. I thought it was there for them. They ran it 4 times in the first game. Still on the fifth possession, this is the links that they are going to at times to make things easy for Russell Wilson. And that may sound like a shot at Russell Wilson. I just think it's reality. This is jumbo 13 personnel on 3rd and 1. So really, I mean, maybe what do you call Cordarrelle Patterson at this point? Running back, receiver, hybrid, whatever. In any case, Pickens and Patterson are down here to the boundary. You've got an eligible offensive lineman, the jumbo portion. You've got Washington, the tight end, and Freiermuth to the trip side, And on the snap, Russell Wilson is immediately looking to the boundary. This is a brilliant call by Zach Orr, dropping Trenton Simpson out into the flats to basically shut off that first read. So you can see Wilson looking down here. Simpson is dropping out, but he's eyeing 1. So he's playing 2-1. He's playing through 2. And almost wish here that he was a little bit less disciplined and didn't expand so much because he's looking for work in the flats. And Russell Wilson is looking for George Pickens. As soon as he turns around, they're able to convert this 3rd one. That was a big moment, that and the play action screen. They were able to get a score out of this possession. Do I think that George Pickens pushed off? Probably. Do I think they're going to call it? No, they haven't. But in any case, watch where Russell Wilson looks immediately. It's all set up to get those 2 receiving threats into the boundary. And really, let's be honest about it. This is 100% a Pickens play, and that's why Russell Wilson pump fakes once, twice, and then comes back to him the 3rd time once he circles around, and they're able to convert the first down. That was a big moment on the 5th possession. We were playing lockdown defense to that point, in my opinion, and they were able to get the play-action screen to Harris for 19 and then convert on the 3rd and 1. They might have converted on the 4th down the very next play. So now we've got Skowronek on the field, still 5th possession. I got 11 personnel in quotes, ace. So they're making it look like he's a tight end from a formational standpoint. It's jet dive and a beautiful run fit by Roquan Smith. Also from the backside, Kyle Hamilton is totally ignoring the motion by Skowronek because we're stepping Simpson out. So Hamilton's able to step down and close from the backside. It's a beautiful run fit, like I said, by Roquan Smith. Limits Najee Harris to a 2-yard gain. I love the pad level that he gets to. Once he gets an opportunity here, he's also trying to dip under this offensive lineman, not let him get a piece of him. Hamilton and Roquan able to fit there, hold Najee Harris to a 2-yard gain. Very next snap on the 5th possession. This is a interesting version of cover 3 that we're playing a lot more of. Again, Skowronek is on the field as a slot tight end, so I call it ace gun. Same formation as the last one, except Russell Wilson was in the shotgun. There's your 4 underneath droppers, what I would say is your underneath guys in a cover 3. Third, responsible corners to the right and left. The free safety is Kyle Hamilton. You can barely see his helmet right there. Short completion to Skowronek. Great response on the throw by Marlon Humphrey. Like I said, Humphrey's playing fantastic football. Pretty much everything they're asking him to do. Creates a 3rd and 4. This is the very next snap. And this version of man free that comes against their 11 personnel, again, you've got Pickens on the field in the slot with Marlon lined up over him. The Steelers, probably know that that's what we're going to do in certain situations. I would look for us to line Marlon up over there sometimes and then drop out to a zone. This is not. This is a 3rd and 4. We actually play man on this. It's a great reaction by Orr'S to this tight end and Roquan getting underneath of the route by Pickens, which is exactly where Russell Wilson is looking immediately. So Roquan drifts over there underneath. Marlon is also playing man. Oh, by the way, we beat the tackle again. This time it's the right tackle, Jones, with Owe. We need a big game from Owe and or Van Noy, someone like that, to get pressure in these 3rd down situations, hold them to short run concepts, at minimum, get them into 3rd and 4 is the winning formula for me on the defensive side, at least in the beginning. 2 more plays from that first half that I'd like to go over from a defensive standpoint. It's an interesting look that the Ravens showed on the ensuing possession, the one after I just broke down. This is the 6th possession, still in the second quarter. It was a slow-moving game because neither team's offense was able to really get much done. Skowronek on the field again in 11 personnel, ace gun. And we're in a 5-1 look. So it's our nickel defense. Simpson is the second inside linebacker on the field, because Skowronek is on. He's the 3rd wide receiver. And so what the Steelers are trying to do is get us to play a 4-2 nickel, and we won't. We're playing a 5-1. We blitz Roquan, and then watch the reaction of Simpson and Malik Harrison. This is really good stuff by those 2 guys to be able to react and get back out in their zone. This is a Tampa 2, is what this is. A Tampa 2 zone with Orr'S responsible for the middle of the field deep. These 2 guys, Simpson and Harrison, being hash defenders, and then the corners, Stevens, and I believe Wiggins in the flats. We're able to get a sack, I think, primarily because Roquan is one of the blitzers, and Broderick Washington ends up being the beneficiary. Unique look out of our nickel personnel, like I said, 5-1 with Harrison and Simpson, very similar to what I showed you earlier. We showed a lot of versatility. Do I think there's a possibility the Steelers come into the game and show some of these similar looks, see if we're giving them the exact same front, the exact same matching, and then try to exploit us? Absolutely, that's possible. I do think they're limited a little bit in what they can do with Skowronek on the field. As an aside, Roquan as a blitzer, I'd like to see it 3 to 4 times this game because I think it has a trickle-down effect on the rest of the D-line. Late in the second quarter, this is going to be one of Tre'Davious White's really good coverage snaps against George Pickens. We've got Marlon in the slot with some safety help by Hamilton, and then throwing the fade to Pickens, who, of course, is asking for a penalty where there is none. We're going to have to defend at least 2 or 3 of these during the game if we want to get stops in the red zone against this team, if George Pickens, in fact, plays on Saturday afternoon. I want to show some of the film from the Steelers' loss to the Eagles last week because I think there's some similarities in the things that the Eagles were doing, number one. Number two, along with what we did against their tackles in the pass rush situations, the Eagles were able to get some of those same things accomplished with Nolan Smith and with Sweat. They were able to get stops on the first 4 possessions against the Steelers. I think that's key for us on Saturday afternoon. Now, one of those possessions, the Steelers did get a field goal. I'm not going to show that. They got a short field after forcing a turnover by Jalen Hurts. We'll go through, I think, 12 plays here from last week. I told you guys once we did get the film started in this video, there would be a significant amount of it. You can see the same exact setup that we had against them, whereby it's 12 personnel, and they motioned 1 tight end from the right to be a fullback. Darnell Washington is the second tight end. That wind back toss play, same exact one that Orr'S fit so nicely, and Tavius Robinson was able to sprawl on. You can see the fullback, Jay, and back over here. He's going to cut Nolan Smith, same exact way that they cut Tavius Robinson. Eagles hold him to a 2-yard gain. End zone angle of the same play. You get the tight end motion in. Eagles did a lot of this stemming with their defensive line after Russell Wilson got under center. I think they were trying to mess with the zone rules that the Steelers were utilized at the offensive line position. Here's Nolan Smith. This would be Ardarius Washington on the aforementioned stop in our loss against them in Week 11. And you can see Harris brings this back. There is really nowhere for him to go. The interior defensive tackles for the Eagles clearly caused some problems. These are foundational plays, in my opinion. Second play of that first drive is second after the 2-yard gain. We got a 2nd and 8. Again, Skowronek is on the field. Same exact concept that they utilized twice against us. Snag flat. So the wide receiver fitting under, tight end running the shoot route out into the flats, and the inside linebacker going to expand. In this case, trying to get out there as quick as possible. Quick reads for Russell Wilson. We would prefer for him to throw the ball in this manner, get the football out quick, such that we could rally and or try to make tackles. We got to tackle well. That goes unsaid in this game. They've got some talented dudes who break tackles. Freiermuth, Warren, Najee Harris among them. First possession still 3rd and 7. The Eagles are in dime against true 11 personnel, so Skowronek is not on the field. The D-line activity was significant for the Eagles last week. Not just getting pressure on the quarterback, but getting their hands up, deflecting balls. This is how committed the Steelers are to their style of play. Second possession here, 1st and 10, 12 personnel, so you've got 2 tight ends on the field, both next to each other. And I don't know how the Eagles get this accomplished. I don't know how Jalen Carter gets this accomplished, given his alignment. They are stemming often to mess with the Steelers' zone rules, like I said. So after the motion, Carter moves down to a 3. I mean, you talk about a 2-gap bubble. You damn near have a 3-gap bubble here, and it doesn't matter. They're able to win matchups in ways that most other NFL defenses are not. Carter actually steps and briefly gets reached into the A-gap. So when I say 3-gap bubble, this is what I mean. The gap that Carter lined up in was B-gap there. There's C-gap, and there's a 3rd gap there in between the 2 tight ends, and Carter just wins and makes it work. 2nd and 8, you would think after the plays that we've seen so far that the Steelers will be going to some other concepts, maybe play action. Nope. They're this committed to their style of play, especially early. Second possession, 2nd and 8, like I said, after that 2-yard tackle by Jalen Carter, pretty much winning the rep on his own. And you get a lead zone concept out of 12 personnel. First tight end, motion in to be the fullback. There's the second tight end again, Washington. And it's a blitz by Nakobe Dean that really what this does is it frees up Vaughn, the backside inside linebacker. So anytime you get a fullback that's on the midline, from a numbers standpoint, he counts as half a man over here, and he counts as half a man here. So does the tailback, in this case Najee Harris, and the quarterback in the center. They're all on the midline. So what that usually means conceptually is the backside linebacker has got to get over here on a run concept away from him. And Nakobe Dean makes that all possible because he blitzes. The center takes him up. The fullback / tight end also deals with Dean. And you can see Sweat and wins, or Sweet, however you say his name. And also Bond shows up pretty much unblocked. Third and 8 on that same second possession. All these possessions are very short. Out of 11 personnel, this time nickel on the field for the Eagles. They're rolling to what looks like a one-high look. And I think our outside linebackers have to disrupt their tackles, whether it's beating them with the pass rush, getting our hands up. The activity level of our defensive line has to be incredibly high, number one. Number two, we've got to identify the running backs and some of these pass concepts underneath of zones, even on a 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8. I'm not saying we should overcommit to anything shallow and open up things behind us, but with their propensity to get the ball to the running backs, particularly Warren in the pass game, in my opinion, it's got to be something that's in the back of our mind, even on 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8. This is 3rd possession. I believe it's after a fumble by the Eagles offense. And now I think Arthur Smith is once again searching. He's got 11 personnel, but it's a 12 personnel formation. So only one tight end on the field, but he's taken one of the wide receivers and put him down there to that side. And very similar to a concept that we defended well, I actually showed you earlier. Play action, except this time it's out of the gun. And you can see routes flowing to this side, all being covered up well. Players in the throwing lane of Russell Wilson. Formation and personnel identification is going to be huge in this game, if you ask me. Slay and the strong safety to the boundary essentially execute a sky coverage whereby the strong safety rolls down and Slay takes anything deep. I think the Steelers are about as committed to what they do as pretty much any team that I've seen in the last 3 or 4 years. And I'm not saying that to criticize or say that it's a limitation. I think it's a strength. Given their defense, given how explosive Pickens can be on big plays, they don't have to take a ton of chances. I would describe it as a safe/conservative offensive game plan generally. And I think our defensive calls need to reflect that. Activity level at the D-line, I think outside rushes can give their tackles trouble. I would be really interested in matching up Matabike, against either their left guard or their right guard. I don't believe our other defensive tackles were healthy in that game. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think that one of either Pierce or Jones was out that game, and the other one played in some type of limited fashion. I could be wrong there. Feel free to correct me in the comments section. This is still 3rd possession. Like I said, this is after a fumble by the Eagles, so we're now on a 3rd and 10, and an organic 4-man rush. If we're going to do these things, basically show the 4 rushers that we're going to use, our outside linebackers, I think, have to win. Do they have to collapse the pocket like this case Sweat and Nolan Smith do? Nolan Smith played a hell of a game against the Steelers last week, by the way. I don't know, but these are 2 situations where I think over the course of the season, they've only given up 21 sacks. Well, excuse me, Russell Wilson's only been sacked 21 times. So that looks low. And in fact, it is low statistically. I think their style of play has kind of obscured some of their deficiencies at the tackle position from a pass pro standpoint. These guys can be had. We got 4 sacks against them the first time. Am I saying we're going to go out there and get 5, 6, 7 sacks? Well, no. I do think we can go out there and get 3, 4, 5 sacks organically if we put them in a ton of known passing situations. Final possession that I'll show will be the Steelers' 5th from last week against the Eagles, and how committed they are to their style of play that I've mentioned many times. They did get a field goal on their 4th possession. Technically, it was a continuation of their 3rd possession, the one I just showed you. They got that possession of the ball near midfield because of a fumble by the Eagles. Got stopped on 3 and out, punted, and the punt returner for the Eagles, Dijon, fumbled the ball back to them. So that's how they were able to get a field goal, 5 plays, I think 14 yards. This is 5th possession. Eagles are up 10-3. They matched that field goal with a touchdown of their own. Seen this setup many times before. Normally, the first 2 or 3 times you see this setup, the slot I, is going to be some type of toss concept, and the Eagles handle it again in a manner that I would say is somewhat anomalous. Nakobe Dean ends up being unblocked. The stemming nature here creates what I would say is almost a 2-gap bubble. Jalen Carter's in a really, really tight 3, so he's not giving up the B gap. He still can play the B gap potentially, but post-snap, he actually ends up in the A gap, same way that he did before. And so post-snap, you do have a 2-gap bubble, and these guys just struggled with their run blocking sometimes in this game. And I'm talking about I'm talking about free releases by players. In this case, you got a wide receiver and the right tackle, unsure of who to go get. And I'm going to show you a couple of plays, examples of this right here at the end. There's some things going on with their offensive line that confuse me because they have been so effective this year. This is another example of it. They're going to combo up to the same guy that Skowronek is responsible to block. So they actually do have a penalty on this, thankfully. I think it's Allen Robinson, but I could be wrong. He's moving forward at the snap. It seems like to me these are called less and less. But Ballin is unblocked on the backside. I think it's kind of like a trickle-down effect. It's a run concept to Warren. He does get some yards on the play, but there's a penalty that pushes it back. Let's watch this from the end zone angle so you can see what I'm saying. It's a Jill ISO, so the tackle should be going to get the edge defender 58, and Skowronek, I think, is supposed to insert inside to go get either the front side inside linebacker or the nickel defender, in this case, DeJean. So certainly looks like he's working up to DeJean. These two guys are comboing to DeJean. They're getting to the front side inside linebacker. No one is dealing with the backside guy. Happened 3 times in this game just in the film that I had. There's some things with their offensive line that seem to be systemic issues recently. Maybe systemic is too harsh of a word. It's showing up consistently, whereas I didn't think I saw it before our game against them in Week 11. That penalty on the wide receiver pushed them back, and these are the types of things that we can't allow to happen. These short little tosses from Russell Wilson to the running back. There is a penalty, in fact, on this one. It's on their left tackle for a hold, by the way. We have to force Russell Wilson to go through progressions in order to gain 10, 11, 12 yards, or for him to just throw the football up down the sideline to George Pickens. This is the left tackle that the penalty is going to be on. Very similar to what I described where Brandon's on the screen, where Brandon Stevens went in man with Pickens and Harrison was left all alone, 3-on-1. Slay is looking for work from inside out. And as a result, that leaves Dean pretty much soloed up here on the running back. Again, this one gets called back. It does go down as an 11-yard gain. They're very dangerous at the running back position, in my opinion. Throwing short passes, it's something that we've got to be aware of. Is there a possibility that we, at inside linebacker nickel position, move up too close post-snap and Russell Wilson completes some balls over top of us? Sure. If you play at too short a depth pre-snap, number one. Number two, if your pass drops aren't as deep, I think this might be one of the situations where we have to have those type of calls and or adjustments in because of how reliant Russell Wilson and the offensive coordinator, at least right now, seems to be on getting the ball to the running backs on short, safe passes that essentially risk nothing on a 2nd and 14 like you just saw. And they had multiple versions of those against us. The play action screens to the running backs we have to close off. We have to limit as best we can Russell Wilson's first read. Essentially, wherever he looks, we've got to have guys in that window. And this might be one of the situations where it's better for our second-level defenders to respond to the quarterback's look and hedge or slide over in that direction. Earlier in the season, we were getting manipulated by those things by some of the better quarterbacks we faced. Russell Wilson doesn't appear to do that as often, meaning look one side, let our inside linebackers flow, and then come back to the other and throw into an open lane that's kind of been created or expanded by our guys moving with Russell Wilson's eyes, with his face mask. So it may serve us well in this game, and that may be one of the reasons we played so well against him in the first matchup, that we are very reactive to the quarterback's first look, which turns out normally to be his first read. In any case, this is my first preview for the Ravens-Steelers rematch in Week 16. I know I used a significant amount of film, but when I watched the Eagles, particularly the first 5, 6, 7 possessions, now look, Pittsburgh did claw back to 17-13. They did score 10 points in the second quarter that I didn't show you here. So they're able to get things done even when their first options are slowed down or closed off. The point is extending that time out as long as we can. We would like for them not to score until early, mid-second quarter. We would like for them to have, quote, figured things out by late second quarter or into the third quarter, and our offense has hopefully gotten more opportunities. We've won the field position battle, maybe even forced or gained a turnover against their offense, which they don't do very often because they are so safe and are so conservative. I think this is certainly a game that the Ravens need to win. I think we've got a great opportunity to win it. We've got to play clean, efficient football. Penalties, if penalties are called in a balanced manner, it also gives us a great tipping point if you ask me, to get a win on Saturday. I appreciate you guys' time. If you enjoyed the film study video with a significant lead-in the beginning, please let me know in the comments section. If you're unaware, likes and comments kind of drive the content and allow YouTube or encourage YouTube to push the content out to larger audiences. And finally, if you think other Ravens fans would enjoy this film study preview of the Ravens-Steelers matchup in Week 16, then please consider grabbing a link to this video and sharing it out on social media to help this content get more reach.